Hello everyone, welcome back to one another session. Today let's learn about part 1 of detailed explanation of Hornbill lesson number 2, We Are Not Afraid to Die If We Can All Be Together by Gordon Cook and Alan East. Brief introduction about the authors. Gordon Cook was born on December 3rd, 1978 in Toronto. He is two-time Canadian Olympic sailor and he sails for the Royal Canadian Yacht Club. Alan East gained extensive experience and popularity as a litigator, manager, and legal trainer. Story introduction. This story, We Are Not Afraid to Die, is an exciting description of a family's experience at sea. It underlines the difficulties that the mariners often face at sea. It brings out poignantly the spirit of togetherness. The story also focuses on the theme of optimism. We learn that optimism helps to endure the direst stress. Apart from this, through this story, the authors highlight that how human beings love adventurous expeditions in spite of the various risks involved. So let's get started with the story. The narrator, 37-year-old businessman, along with his wife Mary and two children, Jonathan and Suzanne, age 7, went on a voyage on their ship in July 1976. They started from Plymouth, England. They wanted to complete the sea trip around the world, just like the one that had been completed 200 years ago by the famous Captain James Cook. The narrator and his wife spent 16 years improving their seafaring skills. They got a ship built professionally, a 23-meter long, 30-ton heavy wooden hull called Wave Walker. They took several months to test it in the roughest of weathers. The initial phase of the 3-year-long journey of 105,000 kilometers passed pleasantly. They sailed down the west coast of Africa to Cape Town. The narrator hired 2 crewmen before heading towards the east to tackle the roughest sea, that's the Southern Indian Ocean. Their names were Larry Vigil, an American, and Herb Segler, a Swiss. On the second day in Cape Town, they encountered a strong wind which continued for several weeks. A strong wind was not a problem, but 15 meters high waves, which were the height of the mast, worried the narrator. On December 25th, they had traveled 3,500 kilometers east of Cape Town. They celebrated Christmas together despite the bad weather. The weather remained the same till New Year's Day, but they hoped for it to change soon. However, the weather conditions worsened. On the early morning of January 2nd, the waves were very huge. They were sailing with a small storm jib at a speed of 8 knots. When the ship was sailing with the huge waves, they could see the huge sea in front of them. The noise of the waves and strong winds was painful for the ears. They dropped the storm jib to slow down the ship and hit a heavy mooring rope across the back part of the ship in a loop. They lashed everything with double force. They put on their oilskins and life jackets, attached lifelines, and went through the life raft drills and waited. Around 6 p.m., an unpleasant silence rolled over, and it was an indication of a disaster which was about to happen. The wind suddenly dropped, and the sky was darker with heavy clouds. A huge cloud was coming towards the stern of the ship, but later the narrator realized that it was a huge wave. The wave was perfectly vertical and it was twice the height of the previous waves they saw, with the top of the wave looking unpleasant due to its height. The thunder increased and the wave moved the stern up. They thought that it would not do any damage, but a huge explosion vibrated the deck. A strong moving stream of green and white water broke over the ship. The narrator's head smashed in the wheel of the ship. He flew overboard and sank below the waves. He accepted that his death was approaching and started losing consciousness. He felt quite peaceful. The narrator's head popped out of water. However, the ship was about to overturn, but a wave turned her upright. His lifeline jacket was stretched. He grabbed the guardrails and sailed to the ship's main pole. The waves tossed him around the deck. He was injured as his left ribs cracked. His mouth filled with blood, and he had a broken tooth. He found the wheel finally, lined the stern for the next wave, and waited. There was water everywhere. The narrator could feel water below the ship, but he didn't leave the wheel alone. Then suddenly the front door opened, and his wife Mary came screaming that they were sinking. She said, "The decks are smashed. We are full of water." The narrator then handed her the steering wheel and climbed towards the door. The crewmen, Larry and Herb, were pumping the water very fast. The timbers of the ship were broken and were hanging badly. The starboard of the ship had sunk. Clothes, crockery, charts, tins, and toys were roaming around in deep water. The narrator swam and crawled to the children's cabin and asked the children whether they were all right. The children replied yes. Suzanne, his daughter, complained about a big bump on her head. However, the narrator didn't pay much attention to it, as his major concern was to save them. The narrator found screws, hammer, and canvas, and then he went back to the deck. The broken starboard side was letting so much water in, and if the narrator could not fix the problem, they would all sink in the sea. Then the narrator stretched the canvas cloth and secured the waterproof hatch, which covered the gaping holes. Some water still streamed below, and some was now deflected over the side. The hand pump was blocked as rubbish was floating around the cabins and entered it, and the electric pump short circuited. As the water level rose, the narrator found two hand pumps, and it had been entangled along with a rope, jib, and a small boat and the main anchor. He found another electric pump under the chart room, and then he connected it to an out pipe, and it started finally working quite luckily. Then the whole night was about the endless routine of pumping out the water, steering the wheel, and working the radio. There were no replies to their signals sent over the radio, as they were in the remotest part of the world. Suzanne's head was now more swollen, and she had two black eyes with a deep cut in her arm. When, upon being asked why she didn't complain or tell him about her injuries earlier, she said that she didn't want to worry him, as he was trying to save all of them. So the story will be explained up to here in this session. Let's check your understanding with these questions. The very first question is, who was the narrator and what adventurous task did he take on? How did the narrator and his family prepare for this onerous task? What was the first indicator of rough weather? What ordeal or difficult situation awaited them on January 2nd? And then what measures did they take to counter this ordeal? Finally, what injuries did Sue or Suzanne sustain? And what does it reveal about her? With this, we come to the end of this session.